All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on the Digital Ready MSL. I'm really excited to spend the next hour with you. For those I haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Scott Thompson. I'm Co-CEO at Acceleration Point, and for the last 15 years, I've had this opportunity to work with medical affairs teams, working with medical excellence teams around how can we maximize and communicate our impact. And over the last several years, so much of that has been about digital. And we're really excited to share this highly requested workshop because so many times, by the time the technology comes out, the team isn't ready to use it. And so today isn't going to be all the big project management stuff about how to roll out new systems or new tools. It's going to be for us in the field who use these in order to be effective. And what we can start doing right now, even if the tool hasn't been set up, even if our company isn't quite ready yet, to be ready for when that digital revolution comes. So thanks for joining. Have your keyboards ready because this is going to be a two-way workshop. This isn't just Scott telling you everything he thinks. So really excited that you're here. And just to get started, make sure all the technology is working. I see a lot of people are already putting in the chat where you are dialing in from. So please, let's all do that. Everybody just put right into that chat, where are you dialing in from? We've got Calgary, we've got Atlanta, Baltimore, Bridgewater, Roanoke, Detroit, the UK. Look at those dots popping up all over my magic map. All right, talking about digital, right? Raleigh, Tennessee, Philly, hello. San Fran, the UK, California, Memphis. We have people all over. Fantastic. I am glad that the tool's working and the data's working. Let's do maybe just one more. I'm curious, just so that we can make sure we're talking to the right people. Tell me really quick, what role do you have in medical affairs? Just put A, B, C, D, E in your chat here, and just tell me, are you are you a medical affairs executive, an MSL, field medical leader? Strategist. Okay, so we've got mostly, our MSLs. We've got a lot of folks in here from medical excellence or operations. Some executives have joined us. Wonderful. So glad to have you here. So today's focus, and I'm glad that the majority of folks that are here are MSLs because today is really for you. And I'm glad that all these other folks that are here to help design solutions and bring tools to you are here to hear it as well. But it's about how can we, as MSLs, get ready for this digital revolution. So why don't we just jump in? So let's start here. I have a question for you. And that first question is, if you look at the evolution and the speed of adoption of technology, it's getting faster, right? If we look at Netflix as an example, right, it took 10 years for Netflix to get 1 million users to be using Netflix, right? And then it took Facebook about half that time, right? 4.5 years to get 1 million users on board and using Netflix, right? When we get to things like Instagram, right? 2.5 years. It's getting faster and faster and faster. I would love to see everybody's guess on how long it took ChatGPT to get to 100 million users. So go ahead, put it in the chat. Let's see what your guess is as far as how long you think it took them to get to 100 million users. Okay, 6 months, a year, 60 days, 6 months. All right, we've got most people thinking around 6 months, some about a year. Yeah, definitely faster than Instagram, right? Wonderful. Well, how about this? What if I show you one more piece of data and say, well, how long did it take TikTok? TikTok only took 9 months to get to 100 million users. Anybody want to update their chat? Go ahead, just put it in. Okay, I think our 1 month, 6 months, it took ChatGPT 2 months to get to 100 million users, right? Isn't that crazy? Right? In 2 months from the day they turned it on and launched it and shared it with the world to 100 million people using it. Right now, I can tell you, as I've worked with so many medical affairs teams, Sometimes it doesn't feel that way, right? Sometimes it feels like we might be the only people in the world that don't have the newest technology, right? Sometimes it can feel like other industries in my personal life, my friends, even our commercial teams are getting all these new technologies and tools. And sometimes it can feel like medical affairs was kind of stuck, right? Still carving stones sometimes. But what I can tell you is that if that's how you feel, you're not alone, right? What we found is we actually, about 2 years ago, there was a survey done live at one of the Medical Affairs Professional Society sessions where they found out that only 3% of medical affairs teams had deployed omnichannel capabilities, and about a third even had a plan for doing so. And I can tell you that over the last year, over 3/4 of the teams I work with have not only a plan in place, but have started deploying it. It's happening now, right? All of this talk, all of this investigation, all of this, how is it going to work for medical, is changing. And I see it's changing because one, if you look at LinkedIn, right, and you see the jobs that are starting, people are getting heads of omnichannel, heads of digital for medical. And it's not just one person, they're starting to get teams. Right? We're starting to see dedicated funding for medical to make decisions around the tools and technologies that best support their work. And we are still hearing from commercial, hey, we are so far ahead, we need you to catch up. But then when we start collaborating with them, they're not that far ahead. We can still catch up. We can still play kind of in the same sandbox. So that's where we are starting from today, is this assumption, this belief that over the next year, we're going to continue to see medical affairs deploy technologies out into the organization, out into the field, and we need to be ready to do that. Okay? So what I'd love to do is just start by asking you, what are the technologies that you see coming in your organizations? Right? Just put them in the chat. What are you starting to see? What are the tools, the technologies that you see are coming? Right, so we definitely are starting to see folks get to experiment with AI. Okay, a couple of people said AI. What else? Put them in there and repeat other people. Okay, AI. A lot of people are getting AI. Okay, customer data platforms, right? Having more information about our customers and bringing that data into one useful place. Being able to use AI for free text analysis, love it. Yeah, some people are updating their CRMs, right? There's a lot of foundational stuff that has to be done. AI-assisted insight generation, data lake, right? So for anybody who's not using that, it's getting all this data in one spot so we can actually use it together. Currently Viva, but AI, I know there's others, absolutely. Social listening, absolutely, right? So we're starting to see people get access to analytics around social. All of these things are coming. Right? Digital content, you're using iEnvision, fantastic. So while these technologies are on their way, they're not always ready yet to be used prime time for medical affairs. What I'd like to do is share with you what I'm seeing as 4 skills that MSLs are adopting and learning, and the very best ones are learning it before they get the technology where they have to use it. And some are struggling after these technologies are actually deployed because they never had the opportunity to learn and practice these skills ahead of time. So the things I'm going to show you, they don't require any special technology. You don't need to go spend, $1 million on some new platform. We're going to talk about the specific things you can start doing today. At the end of each section of each of the 4 skills, I will preview for you some of the technologies that are coming, some of the ones that you mentioned here, and even some others that you should be aware of, know what they are, and know how to get involved. So by the time that data comes to you, or that tool comes to you, it's useful and ready to be of value. So let's take a look at those 4 skills. So when you start moving into this digital space and have access to these tools, I'm finding there's 4 things that MSLs need to get good at. That's really different than the way that we operate today. The first one is trigger-based engagements. Okay, we'll dig into what that means. The second is to become a multi-channel curator. We'll dig into that. The third is to move from event thinking to sequence thinking. And the last one is to become a question expert. Okay, so we're going to dig into each one. For each one, I will share with you just a little bit about some context of what it works. We'll do a little activity together just to make sure we're all thinking about it the same way. And then I'll share some of the things that are coming in the near future. All right, so let's jump in to trigger-based engagement. Okay, so what is trigger-based engagement? Traditionally, we have what we would call planned engagement programs, right? Over the last 4, 5, 6 years, I bet many of you on this line have been part of some new program, new training around territory planning, around collaborative key account management, where you've started thinking about how are we going to proactively plan what we're going to do in our territories in order to maximize our impact and make the biggest impact we can, okay? What happens when you move digital is that some of that proactive planning moves to reacting to triggers from a system that has done some planning for you, right? Now, it doesn't replace it all the way, but one of the things that we're not typically doing today is being in a position where we are reacting to the triggers that come to us. And what happens is it becomes much more dynamic. So as data changes, right, as somebody publishes, as somebody says something from podium, when somebody does something on social media, when something happens in commercial and there's a reason for medical to engage, these triggers start to be delivered to each other through these systems. And we need to be ready to receive that, prioritize the ones that we're going to act on, and take an action so that we can act as part of that system. All right, so let's just think for a moment together about the data that you currently have, right? Just any data sets that you have where you would like, wow, if I knew that an HCP did this, I might want to know so that I can act on it. Just drop that in the chat. What are some of the various data sets that you would love to be notified about versus having to go check all the time? Drop those in the chat for me here. Let's see, publishing, HCP, okay, new data shared, number of patients with a certain disease. Yeah, if somebody registers for a Congress social media posts, if somebody presents at a Congress, awesome. Congress presentations, combination of your CRM data and customer, so pubs, trials, guidelines, cross-functional HCP engagement. Yes. Example, podcasts. If somebody is on a podcast, absolutely. We want to know what they're saying, what their office schedules are. That's brilliant, right? Like, when is somebody available? Excellent. A lot of those things you can start doing today. And so what I would share is if I look at the data sets that you have available, there are some that most of you have access to right now that you could be setting up notifications for. And the more planned that notification is, where it's specific to you, right? That they not just presented, but they presented on a topic that you care about, right? The more that you make it specific, the more actionable it is. So some of the ones that are available right now to all or most of you, right, include publications, right? You can set up searches, whether it's directly on PubMed or you can do it through your KOL profile provider to get notified, right? The next one would be Congress abstracts, right? Most of you have data sets that tell you when somebody is presenting at a Congress. The best of those data sets will tell you when somebody's going to present at a future Congress versus when they just did, so you can actually go react and respond to that. And then you've got your CRM data, right? This also might include MIRs, right? Which a lot of you are already involved in. So those are kind of what I would consider the basics that most of you probably already have. You might even already have notifications set up, but if you don't, you should practice getting your notifications crisp and delivered in a way that you read it and get a lot of value out of getting those alerts, because over time, the systems will start producing these for you, and the clearer we can be on which ones are useful, which ones are not, the better, okay? Here are some that are coming soon, right? Some of you might have these, a lot of you might not, right? But Today, I'm going to put social listening here. And the reason it goes here in my mind as I work with teams is that it's still fairly informal for most teams. Some teams do have platforms like Quello or others that go across the millions of sources, narrow it down to the scientific content that actually matters, knows who's in your territory and delivers it to you in a nice digest. That's what I would mean by a notification. Now, if you don't have access to a tool like that yet, you could definitely look into some, but also you can go to the various platforms. Go to LinkedIn, go to X or Twitter, go to Instagram, wherever your KOLs are, and subscribe. Listen, right? Pay attention to what people are saying in those spaces. Soon, I'm seeing SciComm teams really putting a lot of effort into upgrading their portals right now. So pretty soon, you'll be notified, if you're not already, when somebody downloads or reads a piece of your content on your portals, right? And then you can know to follow up and say, this is something somebody was interested in when they were interested in it. Maybe I should follow up and see if they have any follow-up questions. The other thing that's coming from a soon perspective is, I would say, global, local collaboration, right? We've been hearing for years that our MSLs don't know when global's engaging with somebody and global doesn't know the latest of what's happening from an MSL's interactions. We're starting to see more collaborative planning occur. And so some of these notifications will be made available to each other. And then the other one that I would say is coming soon would be commercial collaboration. And this one is interesting because a lot of folks are trying to put systems in place to drive that collaboration right now. However, they're running into some problems because they never sat down with a MSL and a sales rep and crystal clear said, here's what you guys should be talking about, right? And if you can't teach two very intelligent humans what to talk about and what activities one does that should trigger a notification to another and do it through conversation and maybe email, you can't teach a computer to do it for you, right? So we have to start getting into what does that collaboration look like and get much clearer, okay? So that's the soon, right? Those things are coming. Most of you probably have that on your roadmap and should start to get involved and do it yourself, do it manually, so that by the time you're asked your opinion, you can have an informed point of view on here is what was useful and here what just kind of distracted me or caused problems that I need to make sure don't get built into the systems, okay? In the meanwhile, you can get a lot of value out of just doing it, right? Here are some things that I see happening that are a little bit more interesting, but they're a little bit further out, right? So I'm starting to see a lot more notifications based on clinical activity. For those of you who attended our webinar on measuring and communicating the impact of medical affairs, we started talking about how a lot of medical affairs teams are really starting to take measure of, is there a change in clinical practice, right? And those who didn't see it, we'll put it in the notes when we send it out afterwards. You're welcome to watch it on YouTube, but teams are really starting to say, what is our true impact? And we're trying to start taking more accountability directly at the clinical level. And so I'm starting to see teams look at putting claims data, putting data in to say, hey, here are some of the gaps that are happening in care that could be because of a knowledge gap. Please deploy somebody to this spot, right? Yeah, Carl, thank you for sharing. Some HCPs may see their content consumption as data as invasive, right? So some HCPs may see their content consumption as data as invasive. Yeah, so it is interesting, right? This balance of, are we listening and is that invasive? I can tell you that we've got, I think we're upwards of 36,000 HCPs that we're listening to in the social space. I've run 9, 10 digital opinion leader ad boards where we've had HCPs that participate in the social space. And at least in social, what they're telling us is that we know we're doing it, right? We're putting that stuff out there on purpose, and we want people to listen to it. So that's what we're hearing in the digital side. The claims activity, we have to always be careful of how we are using it, right? It's not our role to go in as a hammer, right, and manipulate and push and tell somebody you're, performing wrong. It's to understand, like, is there a gap between what somebody's telling me during our face-to-face interactions and what actually happens in practice, so that we can get their more insights about it so that we can figure out what to do. But your point is very well taken. So thank you. Clinical activity. Another one that I'm starting to see people talk about a lot is social determinants of health. What they're starting to do is look further and further into the future of where they can make an impact, right? And so if they see that there's a population growing in a particular area, they're starting to try to use that to prioritize resources and prioritize time in those areas. So that's definitely one. And then maybe one other I'll share here is what I would call web activity. What's happening here, and marketing teams are already doing this, but I'm starting to see more medical teams doing this, is they're actually looking beyond the content that you own to see what are they searching on the internet. That we're placing content into society websites and into social streams and letting people interact with it. So those are all things that are coming in order to drive triggers, for activity. Now, here's the drawback. It sounds great, right? Sounds great. However, you can very quickly become overwhelmed with the amount of data coming at you, right? And so the work that these technology teams and your digital teams are doing, it's not a technology project, right? Like, the technology is quite simple of saying, hey, look at all this, look for these triggers and serve it up to someone. The hard part is to prioritize which ones I should work on if I only have capacity to work off of 15 a day or 10 a day, right? And so what I would ask is, and I think this would be a really good project for us here, is to think through three things. The first is, what are the alerts that you would find useful? Okay, don't write yet, but what alerts would you find useful? Okay, there's too much data for you to have to go check all of these places all the time and go research it yourself. So how do we get it served up to you? The second is, would that alert be a high priority, medium, or low priority, right? Because we can't act on 50 or 75 alerts every single day. And then ahead of time, what is the action you would take based on what you heard, right? What action would you take based on what you heard? All right, so what I'd ask you to do is just everybody take a moment in the chat to actually write that down, right? So here's an alert I would like, put H, L, or M for high, low, or medium priority, and then an action you might take from that. Would love to hear some of the examples that you have. While you're doing that, ultimately, we want to leverage digital to enhance customer patient experience and help. Yes, right? I absolutely love that quote. Conrad, great to see you here. Ultimately, we want to leverage digital data and insights to enhance customer and patient experience, help in better decision making. Yeah, if we don't actually connect the work that we're doing, whether it's digitally enabled or not, to patient outcomes driven by a better clinical experience, we're not going to be able to get to a point where we're talking impact, right? We can talk productivity, we can talk quality, but we can't talk impact unless we get down to that conversation. Thanks for sharing, Conrad. So anybody that has started, just put it in the chat. What are some data alerts that you would like? Is it a high, medium, or low priority? And what would you do about it? I know, this one's harder. This is the hard work. All right. Kathleen, if a KOL has a new podcast or treatment algorithm, right? I want to know. Thank you. Who else? Look at this trick. New HCP additions to my territory institute. Yeah, so when somebody joins the institution, I want to know about that. High alert HCP, attending local Congress, action risk or plan for attending the Congress. Yeah, so we want to know in advance. New alerts for keynote speakers at Congress's SAE monitoring post-market surveillance. Really high reporting. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. High alert HCP. Oh, we did that one. Let's see. KOL editorial response in a journal. Absolutely. Right? These are all things that you can act on. But in order to do it at scale, even before you get some tool that helps you do it, it's important to prioritize which ones you would want to know. And then what are you going to do about it so it's automatic, right? When you get the alert, you're not spending, time thinking about, well, what should I do about this? You already know. So like, I think I just saw, you wrote, any KOL moves to a different region or territory. Yes, we should have a plan. When a new KOL enters my territory, here's what I'm going to send them, right? Or here's how I'm going to reach them, right? I would love to know the participation of KTLs as PIs in competitor trials. Yeah, it's out there, right? So the lesson in this piece, right, before we even get to any of the tools that are being built by our teams, is to really start thinking, what are those triggers that we care about, and what are we going to do about it when we get that information? And as an MSL, you can start thinking, well, if I have these things that I need to do, let me sign up for alerts in the different systems I have and start planning, right? If you have any of the KOL profile providers, you have the ability to set up alerts on that, right? If you have access to social media, you can either use a tool like Quello that brings it all together and serves it up to you, or you can just go to the different platforms and put in searches, put in notifications, and get alerted of these things, right? Use Google Alerts, use PubMed. Excellent. Can one platform be customized to present selected high alerts to meet both medical? Yeah, so Anju, good question. So the question here is, can one platform be customized to present selected high alerts to meet both medical affairs and commercial needs? Yeah, so the later, right? So right now, you set up your own alerts in your platforms, right? Practice it, get good at it, and keep track which ones worked, which ones did I act on, which ones did I just ignore because they weren't a priority. So that way, when you have input to share, then you can, have some background and experience reacting to these triggers. To your question, Anuj, what's coming next is a whole series of tools that fall under the category of next best action. Now, I do know that there's a lot of folks on here that are on the side of the medical team where you're the one responsible for implementing these things. So while this isn't a deep dive on implementation, based on Anuj's question, here's a couple of pointers that I've seen around next best. Okay, so the first is next best is a leadership alignment activity, right? So yes, you can program an algorithm that sends a different alert based on priorities for medical than you would for commercial, and the person can get that specific alert. When those alerts start to cross over between I did something in medical and I want that to trigger something that commercial does or vice versa, you need to get alignment on that first. You need to discuss it and go ahead and start doing it now. It's called have a meeting with your counterpart, discuss these things and take these actions, right? And eventually the tool can do it. Now, here is the next step of that, right? Is you start with alerts, right? You start with programming, right? Of rules that we can predict. The next logical question is, well, what about the stuff I'm not thinking about? Can AI, as Conrad put, can AI eventually generate those alerts given the appropriate prompts? And the answer is yes, right? We have already seen algorithms, we've already seen machine learning be able to look at the data and generate prompts or generate triggers to go take action, right? Some of the top tools are already doing that. Here's what I've seen for those that are implementing it though, is that if you skip over the rules-based and go straight to letting the computer figure out what might be important, two things are missed. One, the team doesn't understand it. The team doesn't necessarily trust it. So we start with the things that are familiar. It's a lot faster, a lot cheaper to implement it and get people used to responding to prompts. Then you can go to a phase 2 where instead of having AI or machine learning actually deploy that next best action suggestion directly to the MSL, we actually can use it to say, hey, what rules are we missing? Right? What are the things you think as a computer we should be doing based on what you're seeing in the data? Go review those with your team and say, hey, I'm getting some suggestions from our AI, from our platform. What do you guys think about these? Should we put them in as rules? As you start to work on it, two things are happening. One, the team is getting more confident that the machine is coming up with meaningful, appropriate suggestions. And the other thing that's happening is that as you feed that information back in, saying, no, that one doesn't work. No, that one's not compliant. No, we just won't ever do it. My team won't do that. It will get smarter. And then the algorithm can finally start producing things on a more consistent basis that the team finds valuable, and then you could turn it on to go straight. Now, there's a question in here about like, what is the platform that can do that? Like, is that like a Chat GPT, or is there something better? So here's what I'm seeing with this is Chat GPT. I can tell you today that it doesn't do it, and in 48 hours it could, right? That's how fast it's changing. What I'm finding though is that Chat GPT right now is quite good at things that it's saying. And you can even give it with enough context. I'm an MSL. Here are the types of things that I do, based on but you have to actually really tell it what you're looking for so that it can find examples of it and give it back to you, right? That's kind of what it is. Some platforms, like Quillo included, we program a lot of that stuff in the background so that if you type a one sentence thing into the prompt, it's like adding a whole bunch of context that you don't have to think to do, and then it makes it better. But for right now, for these kind of regular ongoing triggers of a whole bunch of data, you're better off using more of a machine learning platform to do that. ChatGPT could be used to interact with that data. It could even help to craft the final recommendation in a more automated way. But I would say it's more of a platform like a true machine learning algorithmic platform right now. Okay, Nicole? Hope that helps. Feel free to put more questions in if you have one. But for going back to all of the MSLs in the room, that is where I would start, right? On this one, we need to become more versed at expecting a trigger, prioritizing those, and then knowing what action we're going to take in advance so that we can take it faster. Because as more alerts come in, we're going to need to act on them. Okay, Nicole. Yeah. So I don't typically endorse any particular ones, but I can tell you I've seen some good success with IQVIA. They have a really nice platform that I've seen used for medical affairs. Octana is kind of an industry standard right now. Those would be kind of the two, I would say, leaders in the space. And then I have seen several teams building them out themselves. That's also working if you have the IT infrastructure in place. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. Let's maybe get into the next skill then for the MSL. So the next one is what we call sequence thinking, right? So traditionally, we do what we call event thinking, meaning like, okay, there's this thing coming up, I do this one activity and then I'm done. And what we're finding is that in the digital age, we have to move to thinking more in terms of sequences, right? So what does sequence thinking look like and how could you use it today? So as an example, let's say you have a goal, right? And your goal might be to increase attendance at medical education programs. I don't know if all of you do those, but a lot of MSL teams are working directly with providers actually providing medical education programs, right? And so a sequence that you might think of, instead of, hey, I'm going to let people know through an email and then attend, with this world of digital, you have so many more steps along the way that you can deliver, right? So for example, you might document a knowledge gap in CRM, right? And say, hey, this person has this knowledge gap. And because I checked that off, or because I put that into the system, When there's a program in their area, maybe there's a approved email, right? So some type of email template that goes out notifying them, hey, we have a particular program coming up. We wanted to make sure you were aware of it. And then after that, maybe they're on a society website and they see, this is going to be a scary word, but maybe they see a banner ad, right, for that same program. Now, it's not going to everybody. It's going to that one person, right? Now, I just want to give it a little disclaimer here. It comes up all the time. When I say things like banner ads, when I say things like marketing, I'm talking about the tools, not the content, right? Both medical affairs and commercial use PowerPoint. You both use CRM. You both use a lot of the same tools. It's about the content of what you're putting in there. So when I say marketing or I say things like banner ad, it's about making sure people are aware that the thing exists, okay? And so then after that, maybe they start seeing posts about that topic in LinkedIn. And then finally, when they register on the website for the program, maybe it should trigger a notification in the CRM to the MSL so that the MSL can maybe take an action, right? And then at the attendance, right, did they actually attend? And is there a follow-up that happens if yes and if no, right? And then after that, maybe there's a survey or a quiz or something at the end of that program that the results should be sent to the MSL saying, hey, what should I do the next time that I see this person? Is there something I should be following up on, right? So instead of thinking of these as separate individual events, the power of what's going to come from this digital environment is that these things are connected, all right? Maybe just another example. I won't write it out just for time, but let's take insight generation, right? So, when we do deployments of insights in Quello, we actually work people through that it's a sequence, right? You start by defining your learning objectives and creating key insight questions. Then after that, you might say, I want 400 data points from my interactions with HCPs in order to feel confident in that data. And maybe I also want to get 200 data points on slightly different questions from TLLs or commercial. I want to then also compare to what I heard in social listening to see if it's the same. And then I might take that really nice analysis and present it at an ad board and get feedback about, hey guys, here's what we heard from your medical community. You were part of it. What do you think the implications are, right? So, and then you would have an insight to action meeting at the end to really discuss, like, what are the implications? What can we do about it? So again, those are just some examples of sequences. And if there's things like that you're doing today, you don't need to wait for a big, powerful tool to do sequencing, right? Today, as an example, you could put some of those sequence emails directly as templates in Outlook, right? Or in Word, right? Like the example we use. What are those things? When I get notified about something, I need to have a sequence of 2 or 3 or 4 of these, okay? Lots of questions about the AI. Yeah, so for those of you who have deployed AI, I'm going to get to AI here in the next section, like specifically like prompt engineering, ChatGPT style AI. But I do see that AI is doing a really nice job in helping to improve communication, especially when it can be trained on your own content. But if you don't tell it, if you don't ask it for what to do, like if you don't tell it you're planning to do sequences and don't have the mindset of I want to have a sequence of communication to achieve something, then it doesn't know that that's what you want its help with. So you kind of have to teach it that. I do think that you can use, whether it's ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot, to help craft those really quickly. You can even ask it, what's the next step in this conversation if you have that documented somewhere, and it can just show up in your email. But again, for those that have those things deployed, those are fantastic. For those who don't have that yet, work on the drafts, right? Think about the sequence, okay? Pascal, love it. Sequence thinking, establishing a personalized customer journey. Yeah, so I think that there's some that's a next step. So you have sequencing, meaning I'm going to go through a series of communications to achieve something, but over time you can add more complexity to make it more personalized for that person, right? So later what's happening is you'll end up with these sequences in like an approved email type of thing. You might have omnichannel ways of communicating with them, right? So that's what comes next. Okay, but start today. If you're an MSL on this call, think through what are the 2, 3, 4 objectives that you have in a communication, and work through what are the multiple touch bases I might have on that. All right, the next one. Where do you go when you want to learn something new? Write it down in the chat, right? When you need to learn something new, where is the first place that you go? Doesn't matter what it is. Where do you go? Google search, Google, Claude, love it. Google, Claude, Google search. My preference is YouTube. I love YouTube. Conrad jumps into ChatGPT. Vanessa goes to Google. Up to date. Ooh, I have to look into that one. Copilot, if you're using it, wonderful. Google, PubMed. Yeah, so this has been an interesting transition because very rarely do I hear somebody respond to this question with, I call my local expert anymore, right? It's not that I have this expert that I know and I'm going to call. And the role of the MSL for a long time has been that local expert who has the answers and provides me with information that is now somewhat readily available, whether it's publicly available like on the internet, or if you're going to start making it available through some of your initiatives regarding, Perplexity is awesome, Vanessa. But what happens then? What becomes the role of the MSL if the information that you used to be the holders of and that you would share and that you would present and you would discuss, what does the role become? Right? I would love to hear from the MSLs in the room, especially if you've been through this transition yet. What is the role of the MSL in a world where the information that you used to share with people is already readily accessible to them? We are sorters of key information. We help KOLs prioritize that information. Yes. Okay. Direct the KOL's focus. Provide context to the information. Love that, Charlie. Differentiating information from evidence-based. Yeah, so, there's a lot of different information out there. Some is backed, some is not. Framing the message, addressing specific interests, educating the HCPs. Yeah, those are all spot on, right? It isn't going to be enough to actually just present new information. We need to be there to help. And the term that I've started hearing and seeing that I really like is being a curator of this multi-channel content. And if you think about the role of a curator, like at a museum, right? They actually are like, they could have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pieces of art, but they pick the stuff and they make an experience to fulfill the needs of the audience that's going to be there, right? And so what we are starting to see MSLs do is needing to become more adept at leveraging and utilizing those electronic materials in their interactions because they've already seen it or they're expecting it, and we become somebody who's there to help prioritize. Hey, here, out of the 5 you could look at, here's the one that you should. Here are ones that are from reputable sources, right? So we start to be that multi-channel curator. Now, there are some things that you can do to help this automation and help this digital step take place. Okay, so the first is, if we're going to get to a spot where this automation occurs, it's about having really meaningful customer data, right? So this means making sure your CRM is up to date, that your profiles are good, that you've got good insights, right? And that it's all connected, right? Start doing that today. Content Hub, the biggest shift. And if any of you are involved in content generation, it's about moving to modular content. Okay, I can't tell you how many times a team has been like, yay, we're going to do a new portal and we're going to have omnichannel and we're going to use CLM and we're going to present content a different way. And then they go to get that approved content and it's 250 slides long, right? Like, you can't curate when your source is 250 slides long, okay? So it's about getting to that modular content. Start as an MSL using it. If you have CLM, if you have something else, right? Use the content. Be the one who shares that content and curates it and uses it for the conversation. And then there's work to do to make sure each channel is ready to go before you try to connect them through some type of omnichannel experience, okay? So that is really what you can start doing in that space, okay? It's about really using the data, using materials, guiding towards modular content, and being the curator, helping people discover the right content at the right time for that conversation, okay? The last one is maybe the most challenging. And that is that almost every MSL that I've met and had this pleasure and privilege of working with got into role because they always had the right answers, right? They were really smart in school. They are trained when they get here. All the simulations and all the tests during onboarding are all about, did you know that data? Do you have the right answer? And in order to really thrive in this digital environment, there's this shift that goes from knowing the right answer to being an expert at asking the right question, right? Because the systems are going to have so much more access to information. It can do it really fast. But if we don't get good at asking the right question, we're not going to be able to leverage those. So let me show you a couple of ways that this happens, right? So let's go back to that content conversation, right? One of the biggest pieces of value that we can provide when people already have access to the data and they already have access to materials is to help them recall it and use it and understand it. And so there's a workshop that we've done completely separate around scientific verbalization based on the concept of something called spaced active recall. Now, I don't know if anybody here has studied spaced active recall, but in the adult learning space, it's a very important concept, which has been proven multiple times, whether it's in studies going back to 1939, more recent studies, all the way up into the consumer literature of active recall, of forcing myself to remember something, is what takes content and moves it from the unconscious memory, like I remember there was this chart, I remember that there was a number, to something I can access the moment I need it because I'm in front of a patient or if I'm on podium and I'm answering a question, okay? It's called active recall. As an MSL, you have a tool. You've got this one powerful, powerful tool to help do this, right? And that tool, if used appropriately, helps us overcome the forgetting curve. Right? So if I hear something, I start to forget it. If I try to remember it, I'll start to forget it. But over time, I remember more and more of it, and that's the forgetting curve. What is that tool? What tool do all of you have today that you can use to drive active recall during an engagement? Put it in the chat. Every one of you have it. The iPad. Yeah, you could use that. Flashcards, yep. The tool that you use, though, in the engagement is asking questions. Asking questions. Yes, there it is. I'm going to put you up on the screen there. Look at that. Asking questions, right? That is the tool that we use. And so many times when I sat through MSL training, we kind of put questions in this insight generation category of, oh yeah, and I should ask questions for my benefit. But active recall studies would say, when I ask you a question, it causes you to recall the thing that we are talking about, and hence it moves it more towards your conscious memory and it becomes more useful when you need it, right? When I jump in here, right, you can also space those questions. So most of you probably send an email like this after your interaction that says, hey, great catching up, here's the materials, da-da-da. What if you were just to put a question in there with it, right? It causes them, even if they never respond to you, it causes them to think about the answer, which forces active recall. And over time, those same questions can show up in portals and omnichannel and all those other systems. A lot of you brought up AI, and honestly, we should probably do a session on AI, right? Just on prompt engineering, ChatGPT, everything we've learned. We've done so much with ChatGPT and Copilot, and there's a lot to learn there. But this skill, which is known as prompt engineering, for those who aren't in that space, is something you should practice, right? As an MSL, you are going to, at some point, get a large language model, ChatGPT, Copilot type of program. If you have never used one, you should. Use it for personal things if you can't use it for work, but really go get out there and practice interacting with it. There's 3 things that you should practice when you start using any of these GPT type of models. The first is you have to give it context, right? If I just say, what's the most important thing in this document? It doesn't know what's important to me. So you have to practice giving it context. Again, I mentioned earlier, like in Quello with insights and social media, we append all of that, what's important to me, to be behind the question so you don't have to. But if you're going to do it, like using a standard model, you should give it context. Practice that. The second is make sure you ask very specific questions, right? Narrow down your data set and then ask it a question. And the third is it's very iterative. Don't expect I can just ask it a question. It goes across 20,000 data sources and gets it right the first time. You need to follow up and ask and help craft it. And then the last is that the importance of insight generation is going up, right? If we're not always the one who's just delivering the content, the value that we get out of insights is going to go up. So we must get really good at asking the right questions. And the reason I know that this continues to be a challenge is even McKinsey released a report this year that says that less than 1% of field insights are ever even read. Right? And so we need to get better at knowing what are the right questions that lead to strategic change so we can go collect that data, bring it in, and drive it through in the organization. I know we don't have time to go through the whole workshop today, but we do have a workshop called 4 Powerful Questions, where we actually teach whether you're talking to an HCP, you're chatting with ChatGPT, you're looking at insights, or you're trying to drive active recall. There's 4 types of questions, right? You can ask for further clarification. You can dig in for more information, you can confirm implications, and you can understand why there might be discrepancies between what you've heard. Okay, so these are very important. They're practiced questions. It is by far the most important skill to practice next, right? Is be good at the questions. The workshop is great because we actually use, here's what we heard or here's what we saw. What would be the next right best question? So that was a really crazy busy hour. So we talked about the 4 skills. We talked about really starting to be focused on being trigger based, setting up alerts, prioritizing them, start taking action on them. You don't need to wait. Move to being a multi-channel curator, right? Have content, learn how to use content better and deliver content that is meaningful to the HCP when they need it, in the format they need it, in the channel they need it, until the omnichannel engines start humming for you. Think in terms of sequences, plan them, program them, get ready, and then really get into the whole ability to do questions. Okay, we've got 2 minutes. I really appreciate you guys all being here. I hope this was extremely, extremely valuable for you, especially the MSLs where this was targeted for. What would really be meaningful to me? I love doing these. We've had hundreds of people in the medical community, but what I get a lot of value from is hearing what you found most valuable. So if you wouldn't mind, for me, for my benefit, please just, what was your biggest takeaway? Put it in the chat, and I would love to hear what your biggest takeaway was from this session. What's the one thing you could go back and do today to start practicing these skills? Thanks, Lori. It was fun. Come on, lock in those learnings, right? If you just walk away and don't do something, it's not going to be very helpful. Pascal, thank you. Vision of the future. It's quite concrete. Thank you. Okay, prioritize your notifications, Josh. Yes, planning and prioritizing. Starting to practice now. Think about a new approach to tech. Yes, right? Spur active recall. Yeah, I love the whole idea of pushing that recall. Setting up alerts that are more meaningful, asking questions, sequencing. All right. Well, everybody, Annabelle. Oh, hi, Annabelle. Active recall. Yeah, that whole piece of active recall. And again, you'll be able to get the recording if you didn't grab the names of the studies and books, but I find it so important, right? Thank you all. Current and future triggers. Great active recall. Appreciate that. Great. Well, based on some of the things you said here, we'll continue to provide more content. We'll continue to deep dive. We do have our next webinar planned for those that are interested, or if you have people in your organization. And we're going to teach you how to conduct Congress social listening with tools you already have, right? So many of you might have Quello, you might have teams like us doing social listening for you, but we're actually going to walk you step by step. Here's how to prepare. Here's how to get the sources. And we're even going to give you a template for your report and do it live, like while we're on the phone. We've got one of our top social analysts coming to join us. So please, the link is in the chat. We'll send it out afterwards or scan here. We are at 1:00. I loved being here. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful end of your week. Take care.